Looks like we're live.
Yay!
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is Writers Workshop, where some writers who you see on the screen with me discuss a book of the month. It's a nonfiction writing club, and if you'd like to join, there is a link down in the description for the Goodreads group. And those are the people who chose our book of the month. But before we get into that, I would love for my lovely co host to introduce themselves to you. Should we start with hashtag Ava Fox?
Absolutely. I know. Hi, my name is Dana Gaulin, but I write erotica under my pen name Ava Fox. You can find me at that hashtag because it's got good stuff coming up in the near future. Yeah, so wonderful.
And CJ.
Hi, I'm CJ Blair. I'm a writer of things. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Their Linktree links are in the description. And this is Dana's first time on this show, so I'm very, very excited.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Fresh newbie blood.
Whoop, whoop. And my name is Tamara West. This is my channel where I talk about books and writing. And speaking of books, we are going to be discussing. Let's see if the laptop will allow me to share this screen. Let's see if it's going to happen. Attempted fate, y'all.
Do it.
Is it doing it?
Hey!
Boop, boop. So
There it is.
Yes, we read The Heroine's Journey for Writers, Readers, and Fans of Pop Culture by Gail Garringer. Oops, I spelled it with a G in the description. Oh, well, I'll fix that. And I'm really a fan of her books. She has a series called The Protectorate, the Petticoat Protectorate. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yep, that's correct.
And it's a steampunk paranormal fantasy with some romance thrown in for good measure, and I enjoy it immensely. And it's going to be animated. If that sounds like your thing, I would highly recommend picking up a copy of her fiction because it's great. All right, so let's start with discussing what are your overall feelings of the heroine's journey? Like, how did you feel after you read it? Do you think that it was helpful for you? Do you think that it could have been shorter? Like, what overall thoughts?
Do you want to go first, Dana?
Oh, I was going to ask if you wanted to go first.
We're so polite.
I know. My overall thoughts, because I haven't quite got to the ending of it yet, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I felt like I learned a lot from it. But at some points, it just felt like it was the same thing over and over again. And I was like, okay, I get this. And then that's when I realized that I can jump from one place to another. I don't have to read it from cover to cover. And that was one of my favorite parts about it. I could be like, oh, I'm interested in this, so I'm going to go over there. So, yeah, I liked it.
Excellent. So I think I'm frozen on camera, but you guys can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Then we're just going to go with that. You can look at me frozen on the camera if you really must. I found this book really justifying for me. I've spent a lot of my life reading The Heroine's Journey without knowing what it is. I heard like the word The Heroine's Journey maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago, but never really understood what it was. I thought it was just the hero's journey with a woman. But as I dug into this book, as I got further into it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is the kind of stuff I like to read. Mm-hmm. And more than that, it's the kind of stuff I want to write. And so, yeah, it like overall, I agree with Dana. Like at first I felt like there was a lot of repetition, but I don't know, maybe like halfway through it, I realized that it's written very much like, so I'm a history fan, and I like to read a lot of particularly history written by women, because they tell historical stories differently. And this really reminded me of some of my favorite female historians, and how they write. And so I was like, oh my goodness, okay, I'm not trying to read this as like a prescriptive, this, then this, then this is how you do this is how you do this, but rather as a narrative around the heroine's journey. And then it immediately got easier for me to ingest. And I was absolutely delighted.
I think that makes sense because she has that background in archaeology and history.
Yeah, and that is absolutely what clicked for me. I was like, oh, wait a minute. She has this background. Of course she's, I've been looking at this wrong.
Right.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I realized that I'm going to have to go back and like read it very closely and take a considerable amount of notes, because this is the heroine's journey is what Issa from Murder to Spare was doing, and I didn't know that.
Right.
But that's like, so that's what was happening. So like reading this, all these things started clicking, and I was like, yes, there's a very much a reliance of like family and community, and like whereas with the hero's journey, you know, they're kind of going off on their own thing by themselves.
Yes.
What makes the heroine strong is like having that reliance of family and those connections, and knowing how to like to parcel out tasks to other people, and like getting help isn't a weakness. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, this is it. This is what I'm missing. I didn't know what I was missing until I read this, and I'm like, that's the problem. This was the problem.
So
I'm
much
like,
justification.
I'm so hyped. I feel so excited to get back to that book now, which is like very different because I have not felt excited for a while for it. But one thing that I thought
totally
was really,
feel that.
It's so hard when you're frozen because I don't know when you're going to talk. Go ahead and speak, please. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no, I was going to say, I totally feel that. The piece that I'm working on, the story that I'm currently working on, I'll work on it a little bit. I've been working on it for like 30 years, and I'll work on it for a little bit, and then I'll stop because it doesn't work, and I can't figure out why it doesn't work. And then I'll come back to it after a couple of years, and I'll work on it some more, and it doesn't work, and I couldn't figure out why it didn't work. And so I've been working on it since November, and I really did think that this was going to be like the hero's journey type of narrative, but it would be like not all of the hero's journey, and it would have some different spins, and I was okay with that, but it's still like there were major aspects of the hero's journey that it just doesn't fit.
Right.
And as I was reading this, I was like, oh my goodness, I can see, oh, this is absolutely why it doesn't work in the hero's journey, because it's not a hero's journey, it's a heroine's journey. My main character is building consensus and building networks and building communities, and like her motivation isn't about her normal world being destroyed, but rather about a quest to build a normal world. Or not a normal world, but a new community.
Right.
And so like, yeah, I absolutely feel that. Same thing. Same.
Yeah.
So cool. I thought it was interesting that kind of how she broke down the chapters and the way that she wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning of the book, when she was discussing the terms, and she talked about like gender versus sex, and kind of breaking it down that like, okay, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, you can fit into either of these.
Right.
Like, hero's
Yeah.
journey does not equal man, and heroine's journey does not equal female. And that was a point that I think, first of all, I hadn't heard about the heroine's journey at all before. So this was like a brand new thing to me. And I felt insulted because I've spent literal decades studying writing and I've never heard of this before. Like, what the? Wow, you went really fast. Ooh. The fiance brought back beers that I've never seen before.
Goodies.
Do you want to put them in the fridge? So, yeah, I had never heard of it before. And then the idea that, oh, of course, a hero can be any gender, of course. Mm-hmm. But I hadn't really made that definitive connection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's probably a lot of people who are like me and just hadn't really thought it through.
Right. That was one of the things that stood out to me, like, from the get-go, because it's in the beginning of the book. But besides that, because I always lived in a very black and white world where men were the heroes and women were heroines, but the storyline itself is the same. And so when she broke it down, not only did I take it in and I'm like, oh, okay, I can apply this to my story and actually make it better. And now I know what my heroine needs to do. I also took it and I started looking about the people around me in real life. And I was like I was telling my niece and my sister, I was telling them about this book. And I told my sister, I was like, you are totally a hero's journey. And then I broke it down for her and told her why. And she was like, wow.
That is cool.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just really cool. And I think that once someone pulls the mud away and actually gives you a relatable explanation on how to see this more clearly and how to understand it, it does click. It's like, oh yeah, kind of like what you're saying with Issa. You're like, yeah, so
yeah, like this makes sense.
Yeah.
Even though, and it's, I love learning and I love learning new things and I love learning what I didn't know that I needed to know.
Right.
And it's like all of a sudden there's a gap that you didn't even know exists and now it's filled and you're like,
yeah,
I feel so much stronger mentally. So CJ's dropped off, but she will be back. So had you heard about the heroine's journey before this book?
No. And when I read the title, when we were doing the poll on what we should read, I didn't really know what to expect because I thought it was going to be like more deliberate, focusing on female roles and how being a female fits into this box of female characters. And so I was kind of like, because I don't fit in that stereotypical box of female characters, and I don't want my characters to fit in that as well. And so when we started reading it, I was like, holy cow, it was a whole new territory. Different. Yeah, because I thought, for the longest time in my mind, you had, like, I always, like, we'll take Wonder Woman, for example. I look at Wonder Woman, and growing up watching her, she has to be just as tough as her male counterparts, and she basically has to fit into their world. And as an adult, while reading this, it's because that's one of the things that she uses as an example, I really started seeing how, yeah, she is a badass, and yet her feminine side, her feminine energy really comes out and really makes her the heroine. And she stands on her own. Like she can firmly stand on her own 2 feet because of this power that she has. It makes her different than her counterparts. So
it's really interesting to see how the hero and the heroine journeys play out. And one thing that you kind of hit upon that I thought was interesting was like the definition of strength, right? Mm-hmm. And like with the hero's journey, you are strong if you are able to do this by yourself without, and it weakens your character, weakens your character.
Yeah.
If you accept help from other people. Whereas with the heroine's journey, accepting that help is a strength.
Yeah.
It makes you stronger. And I thought that was fascinating. Like how we define strength and what that means. And like she had talked about how the heroine's journey is often depicted in genres that are written or for or about women.
Right.
So like, for instance, with romance and how romance will be kind of discarded. And she was saying that the heroine's journey has kind of been like pushed to the side a bit.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, how many of y'all in the comments had heard about the heroine's journey before this was picked?
Yeah.
You know, like
honestly,
like it was valid.
Yeah, like I was explaining this to my sister, and my niece was present with us, and she's in high school, and she thought I was reading a book about a woman's like a woman with an addiction problem, the heroine's journey. And I told her, I was like, no. And my sister was like, no, a hero is a male or a masculine character, and a heroine is a female character. And my niece just looked at me and was like, I've never heard of a female hero being a heroine. And I was like, what are they teaching you in high school? And so it was eye-opening, like, to see her. And then she started getting even more excited and asking more questions about what I had been reading, because it's almost like, because we collect people to make us stronger and to help us to achieve our goals, we've been pushed to the side. We're not as strong. And yet my niece got excited because she's like, wait a minute, so I could potentially be a hero in my own right. And I'm like, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. 100%.
I know. So yeah, so I think, yeah,
That's so interesting.
yeah, it was.
And why isn't the heroine's journey celebrated or taught? If not celebrated, then just taught. Why is it the focus so much on the hero's journey? It's wild.
I know. I'm like, I mean, when I think about that question, I think it's because we've been put in a box so much that the heroine is in romance. That, it's very rare that the heroine is
CJ says the patriarchy.
Right. Granted, men are fabulous. We need them to open pickle jars. No. But I really do. I think that, like, so at some point in time in our history, women have been seen as the weaker and the less exciting character, not even just being sex, where women are always the side character. They're not really the main focus of it. And when they are the main focus of it, it's a romance or it's erotica or whatever, but it's not action adventure. And I think that now that I've read this book, I'm like, we could totally be action adventure. We are action adventure. Okay. So, well, and the other thing is I don't really think that people understand the difference between genetic female, male, and female energy versus masculine energy. You know what I'm saying? And like I said before, when I was saying that, once it was broken down for me, I see that a male main character can have amazing female characteristics, this female energy, and still be a strong hero, and vice versa. So that was really interesting for me as well.
Yeah, I feel like she kind of I feel like she was kind of going at the patriarchy in the book without necessarily spelling it out
Right.
plainly.
She was gonna let CJ do that.
So, one thing that I noticed in the book, and even in the title, it tells you that it's not just for writers, and I think that is one of the reasons why she may have gone writing it the way she did, where she kind of puts like the historical aspects of it, and she does have a chapter that has, I think there were 10 steps or like 10 subsets of like, this is what how she writes a heroine's journey, and like gives you like some actual spelled out tips, but the majority of it is kind of more in a storytelling way. And do you think that it would have made it maybe a better tool for a writer had been just focused on the writer? I'm over here being mad at my computer because I want to weigh in on this, and it's being too damn slow. Like, yeah, this book is like really up your alley, CJ.
We will come back. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
So basically, do you think it should have been written more for just writers instead of writers and readers, and kind of giving that overview for both subsets?
No. And the reason why is because I think that she does such a good job of breaking it down and explaining it. And as a writer, when I'm watching a movie, I can sit there and here we go, we're in scene 1 and we're moving along and this is what's happening and everything is wonderful. So I really appreciated that she was using movies and stories and historical stories and stuff like that. I really appreciate that. I think if it was just written for writers, it could have potentially been a dry read. You know what I mean? Just like step 1. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's I enjoy learning about history, and I like learning about mythology. And so when she was using examples from like Greek mythology, and then she was using pop culture references that I love. Like in chapter 1, she referenced Battlestar Galactica, and then she was like, the reboot from 2004, and I was like, I love it. I live here now. Like, I'm in this book.
I literally. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, were there references that didn't work for you that you weren't sure about?
Like when she said that she started hinting about Harry Potter, and I am not like, I am not anti-Harry Potter. My kids do the Harry Potter. I think Miss Minnie Monster is a Hufflepuff or something. I don't know. She might come in here and curse me for calling her that, but I know, like, so none of it was anything I hadn't heard of and had a general knowledge of, but the Greek mythology, I grabbed onto that right away. Star Wars, I grabbed onto that right away. What was it? Star Trek Next Gen. I knew what she was talking about. I think it was the more current, because like in the early 2000s, I kind of fell out of the whole TV movie. What's cool? So yeah. So the old school references I got 100%, and maybe that's why it was so easy for me to kind of break down story wise when she was talking about these references, because I'm like, oh yeah, Luke is such the femme hero. Amazing.
I think that is interesting because there's danger in using pop culture references. It leads people into understanding what you're talking about, like a shorthand, or it could push people out of there because they don't understand the reference because that's not something they're familiar with. She does have a index in the back of the book that talks more about like each reference that she uses.
Yeah.
But that was something that I thought about. But they were spot on for me.
Yeah. I liked how she would leave like a link, and then she would, in the brackets, she would literally put link to external, what was it? Anyway, it's a link that takes you somewhere else. And I just loved how she set that up, because it's not like she wasn't trying to keep the attention all on herself. She was saying, this is where I got the information. Go over there and see what I'm looking about. So if you didn't understand the reference, you had a way of going and finding out what it is, where it is, and all that good stuff.
Oh, it's like waiting with bated breath. Is it really CJ, or is it not?
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, one thing, CJ? Crud.
It'll happen.
One thing that I thought was interesting, piggybacking on her not really focusing on herself. A lot of these books, they'll tend to give you, they'll give you their suggestions, their ideas, and their philosophies, but they'll also really focus on their own work.
Yeah.
And she didn't do that as much. And I really appreciate that, because she's an international best-selling author. She could absolutely have just talked about her own work and referenced herself to ad nauseum, but she didn't.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is respectable.
There have been quite a few masculine authors that have put out some good books that are like, well, they're decent. And it's like, and this is how you do this. Go buy my other book to find out how you do step 2. You go buy the other book. Here's how you do this. Now go buy my next book. And so that really was refreshing, that she's not, it's not like she was constantly trying to sell us stuff. You know what I mean? It was like,
there wasn't an upsell there.
Right.
And even there was, which chapter was that? I can't remember, but she was like, here are 2 authors who have addressed these aspects of the heroine journey, and I'm not going to address it, but go check out their books. Like, I was like, yes, I appreciate that, because it doesn't have to be all about you and your work. In fact, I think that makes it like, it makes me give the author a side eye when it's just all about that person's themselves,
Right.
CJ,
Yeah.
Can you hear us and stuff?
I can. Can you hear me? Am I moving?
You are moving. We can hear you. You're like a little laggy, but not bad.
We'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I shut down everything else that was using internet in the hopes that would help.
I think that it has. So tell us some of the thoughts that were biting your tongue you wanted to say.
All of the thoughts about the patriarchy. No, this really was, I felt a real kinship. So I grew up in conservative Christianity, and so the patriarchy was a heavy definition on my life. And remains, and while there are strides being made, it's an uphill battle. And a lot of, I think one of the things that made this book stronger was she did not entirely denigrate Hugh's journey. She wasn't like, the heroine's journey is far superior. She was like, these are 2 different narratives. She called them chassis. So 2 different frameworks that you can work within. She even said several times, you can use elements of each within your story. So this idea that there is no one right way to tell a story, but here's a framework that you can work from. Here are some. I really enjoyed. You guys were talking about the myths, and versus like pop culture. I love that she included the story of Inanna. Inanna, she is a Sumerian goddess she tends to be forgotten quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows Isis. Everybody's pretty familiar with Demeter. Greek and Egyptian mythology are very widespread in our culture. But Sumerian mythology is like minimal. And I love that she didn't just say the heroine's journey is a positive journey. She was like, you can turn it on its head. And here is an example of that from ancient myths.
Yeah.
And so I
love her story.
Inanna's.
Yes. Yeah, I love it.
I was unfamiliar with it until reading it.
So I was talking earlier about the historians that I like. There's a female historian whose name is Susan Wise Bauer, who wrote a series of histories. And the first one I read was called A History of the Ancient World. And she talks about Inanna and Inanna's father, Sin, who was the moon god, and how important she was to Sumerian culture as a whole. Mm-hmm. And her myth is just so powerful in that negative heroine, like the negativity of the heroine's journey, the negativity of the side, like turning it on its head. And she's such a powerful character, and she's such a fascinating representation of womanhood and of femininity that I love that she included her. She didn't just say, oh, well, Isis and Demeter and maybe throw in Athena there. And it's not that those aren't good indicators of feminine mythos, but including a negative aspect, remove the possibility of the binary of the angel in the kitchen versus the whore of the bedroom, which tends to be the dichotomy that patriarchy, that the hero's journey and the patriarchal structure puts women in.
Right, like what you were saying earlier. What you were saying earlier, Dana, about like not seeing a lot of examples of women doing things that are outside of that binary of the Madonna and the whore. Like, I think it's really interesting.
Oh yeah.
Schwartz Run, I am glad that you're enjoying this, and I am thankful that the Goodreads group picked this book. Like, I feel like there's been certain books that we've read over the past few seasons that have really just taken my thinking about me as a writer and what I do, and like just taking it to that next level. And I feel like this is one of them. And that's, I don't know, I find that really exciting because I just want to get better, Yeah. Like with each book that we pick, I'm always like, oh, I hope this one like gives me something to really meet there,
Well, I'm glad that we read this book because I'm doing a rewrite on the book that I originally set out my author journey with. And the biggest thing that I struggled is the fact that I wanted my main character to be the hero of the story. And because when I started writing it, I didn't know what the heroine's journey was, I basically wrote like a female character with very masculine energy, but I had to walk this fine line so that she kept her femininity, but she was still very strong. And now I'm like, I got this. We're going to rip it apart. We're going to put it back together, and I got this. And I can say I think I've been reading with you guys for what, 2.5 years now? Well, it would be 2 because we just started this year. This one is definitely among the best. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like I learned a lot. So the link is in the description. Anyone wants to pick it up. I think that we pretty much said that we recommend it. But what is something that? Oh, she was talking specifically about not using rape as a plot device.
Yes.
And
yes.
I was like, oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It makes me sick when I see movies. I haven't actually read books where that's the catalyst, but I can't tell you how many movies that I've seen where rape is the thing that makes her strong, you know?
Yeah.
Even I think it was the second 300 movie, you know, this woman becomes this awesome, you know, assassin and commander of her own fleet, but first she had to be raped. And it makes me sick to see that, because I'm like, that doesn't make us strong. That doesn't make us strong. It's what happens after with our community that makes us strong, not the act of harming us and belittling us and treating us like we're just trash. And so when she said that, I was like, holy cow, we're all thinking it. Finally, someone said it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yes.
yeah. And because it's gotten to the point where it's like you see it and you're like, oh well, yeah, of course, yeah, that's exactly how women become powerful. They have to be broken first, and then you fill the cracks in with gold. And it's like, no. You don't need to do that.
Oh yeah, and that women need to be broken first belies the kind of damage that violence does to people, not just to women, but to people. The invasive nature of rape in particular, but sexual violence against anyone.
Yeah.
And I think she addressed this really well, is that the use of it as a trope is really misunderstands the outcomes that are in reality.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it doesn't address like the psychological damage that sexual assault renders upon someone. And I feel like it makes a mockery. So I was really glad that she put it out there, just black and white. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Oh yeah.
Please stop it.
Yeah.
Can I address
yes.
In I don't know what chapter this is. It's section 1 of chapter 10. And it talks about give your heroine companions.
Mm-hmm.
And then she talks about the different companions that that your character needs to complete their journey. And one of the things that I think is particularly valuable is healthy platonic friendships.
Oh,
yeah.
That and particularly she lists friendship between straight men and straight women, gay men and other gay men, gay women and other gay women, and all the nuances of each are rare in fiction and yet are profoundly important. And particularly for for people who don't identify as cis-het, or who are maybe not always, like, to have all of your relationships boil down to sexual relationship, like that's the only option, really diminishes the value of platonic relationships and how rewarding they can be and how essential to character development.
Right.
It's one of the things that so the I'm working on a series. The series that I'm working on is set within a matriarchal matrilineal culture, and there's various within the world. There are various what do I want to call it? Iterations of matrilineal matriarchal culture. But one of the things that I had to do was go and research, because we live in a patriarchal culture. Most cultures, particularly in the Western world, are patriarchal. And because of this, I had to go and look, because matriarchy does not function the same way that patriarchy does. Mm-hmm. And I think this aspect of healthy platonic relationships is an essential part of that. Right. In that building community is an essential part of how women function, or how feminine, Dana, you call it feminine energy, functions, building coalitions, building teams. And she goes into that a lot. But this particular aspect is that platonic friendships are essential, almost more, and healthy platonic relationships are almost more important within the heroine's journey than healthy sexual relationships or healthy romantic relationships. And while those are aspects that you absolutely should have, this platonic friendship is, and I love that she points that out and really emphasizes that.
I think that a lot of times what we'll see, especially when it's female presenting characters, the friendships that are toxic, the friendships that puts the two characters at odds with each other, you know? And I don't think that's a fair representation of the friendship, honestly.
Yeah. It's very stereotypical. I mean, it's impossible for more than one woman to be in an environment and not want to kill other women who come into their environment. You know what I mean? Like, we couldn't possibly,
the all-girl panel,
right? We couldn't possibly have relationships where one of our female, companions are like, man, I just really feel like I'm an imposter today. And we don't rally around them and say, no, you're an excellent writer. You're so awesome. No, we're out here like, you suck. You are terrible.
You are an imposter. Quit.
So, get in the closet, dang it.
She talks about that too. She talks about how essential it is for writers as a group to form those relationships where there is encouragement, there is that the people around you help you. That's one of the things I love about this community, is that they're like, I feel welcomed. I feel supported. I feel like if I have a question, I can go to the community and say, hey, listen, this is something I'm struggling with in my writing journey. Help me. And the amount of feedback I get is, yes, commiserative. It is, here's what I use. Here's an experience that I've had that worked for me. Questions to better understand what I'm struggling with. Have you tried this? Instead of that, absolutely, Dana. Instead of that judgment, and shoving people in closets and beating them with broomsticks.
Yep.
I was as I guess my life revolves around TikTok these days, but I was looking at a TikTok where this this young woman was talking about how when she turned 18, she had decided that she was, you know, she's going to start reading adult books, right, instead of YA. And
Oh, okay.
as she was starting to try out like adult genres, she realized that the it was so sex focused rather than like relationship focused in general. And you know, then she was like, well, I'm just going to continue reading YA. And I think that that is something that we as authors could, you know, think about. How
Right.
can we represent relationships other than just within uh, a sex context? Because even in a romance, doesn't it make it that much better, that much richer
Oh, yeah.
when the heroine has like the best friend and the family and like, you know, even the cat, like all of the things that makes life that much richer when it's represented in that romance, that those are the authors that
Yes.
to, right?
Right. And that's what, so like when I started writing The Awakening, I wanted it to be a fantasy romance, but I wanted it to have those healthy type of relationships. And that's why I'm glad that I found this, because now I'm like, okay, you know what? I did good, but now I can do better, because even in our real lives, not just our author lives, we have those relationships, and that's what makes our life full. And
Yes.
I want to read books that are fulfilling and they take me to this happy place, because I also want that in my real life. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so yeah, I like the fact that she does say put more of this in there because it is good.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
important. I thought that was interesting too, that she was talking about how the hero's journey, it's more about excitement, and the heroine's journey is more about comfort, which you kind of
Yes.
just hit on, Dana. And I thought that was really interesting, because when you think about it, like just personally, I started writing cozy mysteries, whereas before I was writing horror and I was writing women's fiction. And I started writing cozies because I wanted to feel happier.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was finding that IRL things were very dark
Right.
and very depressing. And I realized that I had loved cozy mysteries all of my life, ever since watching, you know, being a wee child, watching Murder, She Wrote on Sundays with the entire family. We would sit around and watch Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, these are the kind of stories that fill me with comfort and joy. And these are the stories that I come back to even before I knew this this is called a cozy mystery. You know, this
Right.
is
Yeah.
those were the stories that I would come back to because they had the family, whether it's the family that was blood related or the family that was formed, you know, and they
Yes.
had the love and the comfort, and the bad guy lost, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I was like, yes, this is the thing, you know? And I think that there is, as I was learning what the heroine journey is, I was like, yeah, that is comforting. You know, there's like, I don't know. I liked that. I
Yes.
like that. I feel connected to this. Whereas with the hero's journey, I enjoy watching those, and they are exciting, and you know, it's a good watch. I don't really read a lot of books that go the hero's journey, but that's a whole different thing. But I didn't like emotionally connect to that,
Right. Right.
you know. Whereas with
Yeah.
the heroine's journey, I have, hi Aphrodite, just saw you popped up. What do you guys think?
Absolutely agree. Oh, sorry. Oh, I glitched.
Oh, she glitchy.
Am I still there?
I think so. A wee bit.
Oh, yep. You're here.
Okay. I was gonna, when you were when you were talking about romance, I'm not a huge fan of what I've always heard of as like trashy romance, like where it's clearly romance involved. I went through a phase in like my early adulthood where I read a lot of it because it was very comforting. I know that there's going to be a happy ending. I know what's coming at the end of the book. But I also find that the romances that I enjoyed the most were the ones where I see now the plot followed the heroine's journey, where it's about collaboration, it's about family. My favorite series of romance novels, I still read, even though it's not a genre that I'm actively seeking out, but I will reread those books. In case you're wondering, it's the Sinster series by Stephanie Lorenz. I don't pronounce right. But everything about that series, everything like the filter through which she writes is about family and about these men and women who value family above everything else.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. And yes, there's romance involved, but the characters themselves are compelling. The way they love each other, the way they care for each other, the way they invest in each other outside of the romantic aspect,
right,
really feeds my soul. And I feel the same way, Tamara, is that it gives me comfort. When I struggle with depression or anxiety, I don't go and read something like I'm not going to read a heavy theological tome or an intense like thriller or anything like that. And I've always thought, well, it's just because I can't handle it. I just can't handle it right now. And I can't. And it's okay. And so I'll reread something silly, something that feels silly. I'll reread the early Harry Potter books. I will reread the romance novel. I read a lot of Terry Pratchett's Discworld. When I'm, again, the silliness is what I enjoy, the humor, the collective of the group dynamic.
Right.
So,
agreed. That's one thing that she touched on, the comedy aspect of the heroine's journey, and how in the heroine's journey, the comedy is important. It's like inherent in that journey, but in the hero's journey, comedy can still be there, but it's often used as like a distraction to the hero.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting. And how and I think that anyone who's really paid even a little bit of attention realizes that movies that are comedy based do not get as much accolades as like the dramas, and even the action film.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. It's like the heroine's journey is kind of has the things that are the antithesis of what of a book or a movie that would receive those kind of accolades. It has like the exact opposite of that.
Right.
And she talked about how you should be aware of that. And that was one of the things when she was discussing like creating your community and getting involved and having that kind of support, because realizing that you're going a little bit against the grain.
Yeah.
I thought that was I thought that, like, I don't know, I liked everything.
Yeah. I know.
I like everything about it. It's just lovely.
I know. I'm just like everything. Like I feel like I'm just telling you to just read the book. I mean, I'm just telling you everything that I loved about it, which is literally we could go through each and every section and be like, oh yes, this thing resonated with me.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, what would life be without some comedy? I mean, we get stressed out and drop a gallon jug
Oh,
of
yeah.
milk and it spills all over the place. And the first thing we do is we laugh hysterically and then we cry, you know? So it's just,
Right.
it's very natural. It's
Yeah.
our feminine energy helping us survive another day.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like in my family, we always use humor as a coping mechanism. Gallows humor was a must. Uh, without making fun of or making light of the most terrible situations, it would be really difficult for me to function. So when she mentioned the comedy thing, I was like, yes. I and I try to write some humor into my cozies. I don't know if it lands, but
Right.
I try it out.
There have only been literally like less than 5 books where I have read what they said and actually envisioned it in my head and then died laughing. Because it's hard. It's hard to really get it right. You know what I'm saying? And but when you do get it right and it sticks, it's great. It's great. Especially when it's like 3:00 in the morning and you wake everybody up because you're just dying in the living room and no, non-apologetic. You're just like, nope, it was good.
That was hilarious. Hey, Holly, good to see you. Gosh, but we're at the end of our stream, Allie. We're gonna be saying our goodbyes, but you always watch the replay.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
Because we are at the top of the hour, y'all. Can you believe it? This went so quick.
It went by really fast.
Yeah, it did.
That's the joy of a good book.
Right.
Right?
You have a lot to say.
Right. We have a lot to say, and it's good stuff. And I'm definitely going to be rereading this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And taking some heavy notes because I feel like I said, I feel like this one helped me to level up.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I feel like that's what we're trying to do, y'all. Just trying to get better at it.
Yep.
So how about we give our goodbyes? We can start with you, CJ, and work our way up back to me.
All right. My name is CJ Bloyer. I'm a writer of things. You can catch my brand new link tree down below. I was very excited about that. I gave in to the peer pressure, but it actually made everything easier for me too. So my writing links are there. My piano links are there. So yeah, click them all. And you can catch me most Friday nights over on Sarah Scharnweber's channel and the end of every month here with Tamara and others talking about whatever we read.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess that makes it my turn. I am Dana Gaulin, and I write erotica under the pen name Ava Fox. I, too, have a link tree. It's not as new as CJ's, but yay! You can find me there. Sergey and I went for a beautiful walk in the desert this morning. I'll be posting pictures of that on my website and all that other good stuff. So if you want to see what exciting adventure we had this morning, make sure you go there and, do all the things. Click all the buttons.
And my name is Tamara Woods. I'm a cozy mystery author, and I am also working on a second pen name, which is pending. Writer's Workshop, again, is a nonfiction writing book club where we read books about different aspects of the writing life, whether it's about our writing health or about learning how to market and promote, or learning to level up our writing in general. If you would like to be involved in the picking process of books for upcoming months, there's a link in the description for the Goodreads group. Join it, and then you can help us figure out what we're going to read next month. So, and we, as Dana was saying, we do our stream, or CJ was saying, everyone was saying whatever. We do our streams at the end of the month, the last Saturday of the month at 2 p.m. Eastern. So you should join us. Even if you don't buy the book, you can come and figure out maybe if you want to purchase it or not from what we have to say about it. We are very open with our thoughts and feelings.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
I have a newsletter where I give you some updates about my writing life. So if you'd like to join that, there's a link in the description. You get a free copy of Midnight Murder, so you can know whether or not you even like my writing. Also, I have a Patreon, and I'm trying to get to 50 patrons so I can throw my books into paperback. And it is a process, but I'm hoping to get there. So if you'd like to support me and my writing journey, the things that I do for the writing community, their link is also in the description. I think that is enough about my links. Thank you so much for being here, whether you're watching it right now or you're watching the replay. Without you guys, we're just screaming into the void, and we will see you in the next times.